In this video, I'm going to show you guys how you can make your own tail bags for a way lower price than buying them. Some things that you'll need is a sewing machine, some thread, and lastly, some fabric. There is a certain type of fabric that you have to use for tail bags. The fabric that I use is stretchy and material that will not soak in water, but it won't get really wet, so if it rains, you don't have to go out and take it off. Do not use any cotton materials. So that is the exact fabric that you use, but I go with, as long as it's stretchy like this, as you can see it stretches as I move my fingers, it will work. But again, don't use cotton because like the thing said, it will soak in all wetness and anything else that happens to come while your tail bag is on your horse. Okay, now that you know everything of what you need and what fabric that you need to buy, let's get into making the tail bag. First, place your fabric on the upside like this. When you have it placed like this, fold the fabric over. I do have my own tail bags that I measure off of, but so you guys know, I will go and grab a ruler to show you guys exactly how wide I make my tail bags. I also forgot to add that you will need pins to hold your fabric while sewing, and just so that it doesn't move around and get wider or shorter. When you get your first tail bag done, as long as you like the width of it, you can also use that to measure how wide you want it to be. So it is about 5 inches long. Now always make sure to leave a bit of room for when you do sew it, because it does move in when you start sewing it. This is the width that your tail bag should or will about be when you're done sewing it, but always make sure to leave a little bit of room on the outside of the tail bag that you're measuring off of, to make sure that you don't have a tail bag that ends up to be about that long, not this long, if you get what I mean. But if you don't have a tail bag, cut your fabric to about 5 inches long. Now that you have your fabric all measured out, start cutting. I do request to use fabric scissors, as regular scissors do not cut as well and might get caught up or might make jagged lines on your fabric. Cutting is pretty easy. Just cut along this line right there to make sure you get the size and width of tail bag that you want. Once you are done cutting down your fabric and your tail bag, you're going to start placing the pins in so that you don't lose it and this doesn't get pulled back or pulled forward. When I'm placing my pins, I usually place one at the very end and then about this far down, and then keep going. This is how it looks after I put all of the pins in. As you can see, I just spaced them out about, I don't know, just away from each other. As you can see, I put one on this end to hold the end and the other on that end to hold that all together. Now we have to trim this down because this is a little bit too long for a full tail bag. So again, I'm gonna put the tail bag that I already have up next to this and cut it, but I will tell you how much I cut off. But this is the tricky part because all fabric can be a little bit different, especially on how you cut it. Because with this fabric, they could have cut it this way, but they also could have cut it this way. So it's gonna be a little bit different, but most of them should be about the same length. Just to make sure though, I will also measure out this tail bag to see exactly how long it is. And then I'll just tell you guys, I'll also measure like where I tie it, so it will be the exact length. After I cut this, I will measure this. I also moved a pin directly where the tail bag part of it stops. This is where I tie this to their tail. And this part is where whole tail bag stops. So I put a pin there so I know exactly where the tail bag, where I should stop sewing, and then I will cut. So this is how much I cut off of the tail bag, but like I said, every tail bag is a different length, and it really just depends on how you cut your fabric, how long your fabric is, if it's a yard, if it's a yard and a half. So it all just depends. But now I'm going to measure the purple tail bag to tell you guys how exactly long that it is. This tail bag was 2 feet and 3.5 inches. And now I'm going to measure how long the tie length is. The tie length is exactly 6 inches. So this whole tail bag all together, what you guys should cut your tail bag to, is 2 feet and 9.5 inches. So yeah, that's how long the whole tail bag is, including the tying part. One last thing before we start sewing this is I would request that you sew a couple times before you start sewing this. I say this just so you know the basics of sewing and that you can sew a semi-straight line or something like that, and you don't mess up your first piece of fabric or whatever on your first try. So make sure you do so, and make sure when doing this you do have somebody watching. If you're old enough, then obviously that's fine, but if you are younger, then have somebody watch to make sure that you're doing it well and that you don't need any help, or if you mess up, then they'd be there. Anyways, now let's get to sewing this. Here I'm just saying make sure to put the foot down before you start sewing, because if not, something could happen. And now you're ready to sew. Right here, I'm just showing you the pin that I took out. Always make sure to take that pin out before you start sewing, because if you sewed over it, it could end up really nasty. And here we are, we're sewing now. I have my hand here to move the fabric along the line, and then here I'm back stitching. So back stitching holds it to make sure that it does not get undone when you're done. So here we are, just sewing nice and smooth and moving the fabric so that it doesn't get all up in the one piece. Here is the other pin that I took out. Again, always make sure to take those pins out. If not, it could end up really looking pretty nasty. Here's just a close-up of the sewing, so make sure that it is looking pretty good like that. As you can see, the foot is right on the edge of the fabric. And then just, as you can tell, moving my fingers down, making sure my finger does not get into the needle, but also making sure that the fabric keeps moving so that that does not get all balled up or does not get thread all tied in there. So always make sure to keep moving like that. As you can see, I just grabbed that pin out there and set it aside. And then once you're done with that, you just get to keep on going. So I forgot to say this, but when you start and end, you always want to backstitch, which all sewing machines might be a little bit different, but for me, it's just this little arrow, and you hold it down, and it will go backwards, and that's a backstitch. It basically just makes sure that stitch is stable and holds it better, so you'll backstitch back, and then you'll stitch forward. Since people who are watching this, I don't know how much sewing you've done before, so I'm just going to backstitch right here. If you are a good sewer, you can always just pick the tail bag or fabric around and turn it. But for the sake of the video, I'm just going to end it and then I'm going to restart. So my thread somehow popped out of this needle, but I did get a little bit of a backstitch. It's tiny, but it works. But when you're done, you will pull your tail bag out and you will just pull this wire down. Once the wire is pulled down, you will grab your scissors and you'll cut it to a longer length. I use it about that long. And now I just have to kind of put the thread back through this, kind of rethread it. When you get your end stitched and done, now you can do this when you get the side of it stitched too, but you're going to cut all of these strings off that got left after you got done sewing it. When you are done with the end and all the way down, you will cut the pieces that you tie with. And also, again, make sure this is still inside out. If you were doing it as the video went on, it might not look perfect, but make sure it's still inside out. As you can see, the shiny part is in the inside of it, and the non-shiny parts on the outside. Now I only do this so that you don't have this stitch line on the outside, and it just looks way better. You also don't have like these flares on the outside and stuff like that if you make sure that the inside is pointed out. So I just cut the two sides off. I cut in and then I go down and I cut forward to get those off. It's not perfect, but it will work and it will do. Now once you've got it all sewed, we're going to flip this back. Well, we're going to flip this inside out so that the shiny part will be to the outside. This is how your tail bag should look when you are done with it. As you can see, since it was inside out, there's no stitch lines, no flares, and it looks pretty well. It kind of looks like I didn't cut it as even because it's not perfect, but it will work, and that is how you make your own tail bag. I am not going to go to my horse to put it on, but I will explain it. If you guys do want me to show how to put the tail bag on, just comment below and I will make a short of that. But I'm just going to show you right now. So basically you will slip your horse's tail in here. When you bring it up to the top, you will split a little hole, like it only has to be so big, but split it in their tail. You will take the front. I like taking the front so the tie knot is in the back. You'll take the front, you'll put it through that hole that you made in the tail, and then you'll just tie these two together. And yes, the fabric that I use, a granny knot, will work and it comes out really easily, but make sure that your knot, whatever you do, does come out before you put it in your horse's tail. So yeah, that is how you make a tail bag. And as long as you have a sewing machine and thread, this is so much cheaper than buying a tail bag because it's also fun, you know? You get to make a tail bag, it's cheaper, and it's fun. And so that is the finished product of how my tail bag looks. I hope this was very useful, and I hope you enjoy your new tail bag. Thanks for watching. Bye.